"You're not welcome at my wedding." Those words hit me like a thunderclap. I stood frozen outside the grand hall, the echoes of my daughter's voice slicing through the warm evening air. I wanted to believe I misheard her, but the look in her eyes told me otherwise, cold, unyielding, and full of anger. My own daughter, the girl I raised from a tiny baby, was telling me I wasn't invited to one of the most important days of her life. How could she say that? How could she erase me so completely in a moment when I thought we should be celebrating? The shock was paralyzing, but beneath it simmered a deeper pain, betrayal. For years I had worked hard, sacrificing countless nights and weekends to build a home, a future for my children. I imagined us sharing laughter under that roof, passing down stories and memories. But standing there, just outside the doors, I felt like a stranger. What made it worse was what I heard next, her friends whispering. "He doesn't belong here. The venue is theirs anyway, but he's just a visitor." Those words stung, but they also sparked something inside me. Something I hadn't expected. You see, I was the one who paid for that wedding. Venue, not just the venue, but most of the expenses. Yet somehow she thought she could push me out like I was nothing. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about respect, about love. And when those things are broken, sometimes you have to fight back in ways people never see coming. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of the silence pressing down. I could walk away, but I didn't, because I knew this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What she didn't know was that I had a few secrets of my own. Secrets that would turn this whole family upside down. My name is Robert, and I'm a father. That title carries so much weight, pride, love, responsibility, but it can also come with pain, confusion, and heartbreak, especially when the people you love the most start to drift away, or worse, turn against you. Let me introduce you to the people who were once the center of my world. First, there's Emily, my daughter. She's always been a strong, willed woman. Even as a little girl, she had this fire inside her, stubborn, passionate, and fiercely independent. I remember when she was 5, standing her ground against a bully at school, refusing to back down. That spirit made me proud, but lately it felt like that fire was burning in a direction I didn't understand. Then my son Jason, quiet, thoughtful, a bit more reserved than Emily, but with a sharp mind. He was the kind of kid who loved tinkering, fixing radios, building things in the garage. I thought he'd grow up to be just as hardworking as I was. He married Sarah, a kind woman who seemed to fit right into the family. Polite, soft-spoken, always ready with a smile. At least that's how it appeared on the surface. My wife, Helen, has been my anchor through everything. She's gentle but firm, the kind of woman who holds the family together when things get tough. She and I have been through our share of ups and downs, but we always believed that family was our most important legacy. Then there's Mr. Dawson, our family lawyer. He's been with us through thick and thin, helping us manage the legal side of things, wills, property deeds, contracts. A trusted friend as much as a professional. And finally, the friends who have known us for years, neighbors, old colleagues, people who felt like extended family. Some have stood by us, others quietly watched the cracks grow. That's the cast of characters in this story, people I love, people I once trusted with my heart and future. Helen and I started with a simple dream to build a family and a home that would last generations. When we first got married, money was tight. We bought a small house on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy, just enough for the two of us and the kids when they came along. I worked long hours as a construction foreman, sometimes doing double shifts just to make ends meet. Helen was the heart of the household. She kept everything running smoothly, cooking, cleaning, caring for Emily and Jason as they grew up. I admired her strength and patience every single day. Over the years, that little house grew with us. We added a porch where we'd sit in the evenings, watching the sunset. We planted trees in the backyard, ones that Emily loved to tend, and Jason helped me build a small workshop beside the garage. I poured everything I had time, sweat, money into building not just a house, but a home. A place where my children could grow up safe and loved, where we'd share holidays, birthdays, and quiet Sunday mornings over coffee. I dreamed of leaving them a legacy, not just the house, but the values I hoped they'd carry forward, respect for family, for hard work, and for one another. I always believed that no matter where life took them, they'd come back to that home. That's what family does. They don't forget where they came from. But as the years went by, I began to notice changes. Emily stopped helping in the garden. She spent more time away, sometimes returning late with a distracted look. Jason grew quieter, spending more hours in his workshop or with his wife's family. There were little signs, the kind that whisper before they scream a missed phone call, a curt reply, a glance that avoided meeting mine. I chalked it up to growing up to busy lives, but deep down I worried. It was a Thursday evening. Helen had made her famous roast chicken, and we were all gathered around the table like we usually did. Emily was scrolling on her phone, barely touching her food. Jason seemed distracted, glancing at the clock as if he had somewhere to be. I tried to start a conversation. "Emily, how's work going?" She looked up, eyes sharp. "Same as always, Dad, busy." "Not everything revolves around the family, you know." Her tone caught me off guard. "I'm just asking." She shrugged. "I know, but sometimes you make it feel like you own our lives." Jason chimed in. "Maybe it's time you stopped holding on so tight." "We're adults." I felt my chest tighten. These were my kids, my flesh and blood, talking to me like I was an outsider. Later that night, I found Emily's fiancé, Mark, in the kitchen. He avoided eye contact as I asked if she was okay. "She's stressed," he said quietly. "Weddings, work, family pressure, it's a lot." But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. A few days later, Emily surprised me with a request that felt like a slap in the face. "Dad," she said, "I need you to sign some papers before the wedding." "It's about the house." I frowned. "What papers? Legal stuff. I want to be sure I have a say, control." I was stunned. "The house isn't yours to just take. It's our family home." She looked at me, eyes cold. "It's my future, Dad. I need to protect it." That night I sat with Helen, the weight of her words sinking in. Are they really asking me to give it all away? I whispered. Helen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Robert. Something's changing, and I don't know if we can stop it." From then on, the distance between us grew. My once warm home felt colder. Conversations were short, strained. Friends who noticed asked if everything was all right, but I lied, said it was just stress. The unease turned to dread when Emily said to me one evening, voice hard, "You don't belong here anymore." Those words cut deeper than any wound. The day Emily laid down her demand felt like the day the ground beneath me cracked wide open. It started with a simple conversation, or what I thought would be a simple conversation. Emily came over one afternoon, her face set, eyes sharper than I'd seen in a long time. "Dad," she said without preamble, "I need you to sign the house over to me before the wedding." I blinked, stunned. "Sign it over." "Emily, what are you talking about? This house is the family home." She didn't waver. "I'm building a new family. I want security. I want control over where I live and what happens to the place." Her words hit me like a cold wave. "You want me to just hand it over?" "Just like that," she shrugged, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "It's not about taking it away from you. It's about protecting my future." Helen and I exchanged looks, concern mixed with disbelief. "Emily," Helen began softly, "this isn't something you decide alone, especially not so soon." But Emily was resolute. The girl who once loved helping in the garden was gone, replaced by someone who saw family differently, as something transactional, as a power game. Jason didn't say much that day, quiet as always, but when Emily mentioned the house, I caught him exchanging a glance with Sarah, his wife. I felt a shift, like they were united in a plan I wasn't part of. I sat there in shock, realizing this wasn't just a request, it was a demand, one laced with an expectation I couldn't ignore. The moment those papers landed on the kitchen table, everything changed. They were thick, full of legal jargon I barely understood. But one thing was clear: signing meant giving up almost all rights to the home Helen and I had built from scratch. Emily's tone had shifted too. Where once there was warmth, now only cold logic. "You have to sign, Dad. It's what's best for everyone." I refused at first, but the pressure didn't stop. Jason began to pull away, no longer the son I knew. His silences grew longer, his visits shorter. Sarah, his wife, seemed more involved than before, whispering behind closed doors with Emily and sometimes even Emily's mother-in-law. It felt like alliances were being drawn in the sand. Helen and I found ourselves caught in the middle of a growing war. One night, I overheard a conversation between Jason and Sarah that confirmed my worst fears. They were discussing how to handle the situation, how to make sure things went their way. The friends we'd once trusted now took sides quietly. Some offered support, others distanced themselves, unwilling to get tangled in family drama. Our home, once a place of laughter and safety, became a battleground of whispered arguments and silent accusations. Helen worried endlessly. "Robert, what's happening to our family?" I didn't have an answer. The people I loved were turning against me, and I felt powerless to stop it. Mr. Dawson had been a steady presence in our lives for years. I trusted him like family, so when his call came, I answered immediately, hoping for clarity. But his voice was grave. "Robert, I've reviewed the documents Emily wants you to sign. There are clauses in there that could leave you with almost nothing." I sat down, heart pounding. How could this be? She's my daughter. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people get influenced by others. And sometimes they don't see the bigger picture. You need to be cautious." He went on to explain that some of the papers contain language that would transfer ownership in ways I hadn't realized, not just the house, but land rights and other assets. Then came the bombshell. Also, I came across an older will, one that hadn't been updated or discussed in years. It might affect who actually owns the property. My mind reeled. Could this be the key to protecting what was rightfully ours, or just another twist in a story that felt like it had no happy ending? I thanked him and promised to meet soon, but inside a storm was brewing. The day I received the letter from Mr. Dawson was the day everything changed. I was sitting in the living room, replaying the argument with Emily in my head, when the mail came. Among the usual bills and junk mail was an official-looking envelope from Mr. Dawson's office, sealed with the firm's emblem. With trembling hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the documents inside. There it was, a will dated nearly a decade before the one Emily and Jason believed controlled the estate. This was an old document, hidden away in the lawyer's archives, forgotten over time. The will named me as the sole owner of family home and property, with very clear instructions that it was not to be transferred, sold, or signed over without my express consent. It also specified that neither Emily nor Jason were to have ownership until I decided it was time. Beside the will was the original property deed, also under my name alone. For years I'd thought the newer will was the one that mattered, the one that gave equal shares to my children. But this old will said otherwise. It meant the house was mine, legally mine, until I said differently. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with anger. How could my children and those around them try to force me out without knowing this? Mr. Dawson's letter explained the situation clearly. He advised me to hold my ground and warned me that signing anything without fully understanding the consequences could be disastrous. I realized then that I had more power than I thought, but it also meant I was stepping into a battle I hadn't fully prepared for. I called Emily and Jason to the house for a family meeting. The air was thick with tension as they arrived, sensing something was off. I spread the will and deed out on the kitchen table, the document feeling heavier than any physical weight. "This," I said slowly, "is the real truth about the house. It belongs to me. Until I say otherwise, this is my home." Emily's face twisted in disbelief and fury. "You're lying," she snapped. "How could you keep this from us?" Jason looked stunned, but anger bubbled beneath the surface. "Why didn't you tell us before? Why let us fight over something that wasn't even ours?" Helen stood quietly beside me, eyes sad but steady. Sarah whispered something to Jason, confirming suspicions I had they'd been planning to cut me out, to force control of the property. Emily accused me of withholding information to manipulate them. I tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a war of trust, betrayal, and broken promises. The house, our family home, was no longer just walls and bricks. It was the battlefield for our future. "I will not be pushed out of my own home," I said, my voice steady despite the storm. Inside, Emily's eyes flashed. "You don't understand what this is about. It's about my future, my security." "I built that future for you," I replied sharply, "and you tried to erase me from it." Voices rose. Accusations flew back and forth. Jason's silence broke with a bitter, "Maybe you were too controlling." Helen stepped between us, her voice calm but firm. "This family is breaking because we stopped listening." Tears, anger, and old wounds spilled out. Friends who had gathered watched silently, unsure who to believe. Emily threatened to take legal action, vowing to fight for what she believed was hers. But I stood my ground, knowing that sometimes standing firm is the only way to protect what truly matters. The confrontation didn't solve everything, far from it, but it marked a turning point, For better or worse, the family I knew was changing forever. Emily's wedding day should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it felt like the climax of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I wasn't invited. At least, that's what I thought at first. The invitations had gone out, but mine wasn't among them. When I called Emily to ask, she was cold and dismissive. "Dad, this is my day. You're not welcome." I wanted to argue, to beg, to remind her that family means more than any moment, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt a hollow ache, standing outside the grand venue, watching the guests stream in. Helen stayed by my side, her quiet strength the only comfort in the sea of strangers. Inside, whispers followed me like shadows. "He shouldn't be here. This isn't his place." I heard friends and family murmur, some surprised to see me, others openly hostile. At one point, Jason confronted me in the hallway. His voice was low but sharp. "You're ruining everything." "Just leave," but I refused. I wanted Emily to know that despite everything, I was still here, her father. The ceremony was a blur. I saw Emily walk down the aisle, radiant but distant. Her smile never reached her eyes. Later, during the reception, the tension exploded. Accusations flew beneath. Polite smiles. Old friends whispered about who was right and who was wrong. Helen and I sat quietly, the weight of broken trust pressing down on us. What was supposed to be a celebration of love turned into a battleground of fractured relationships. The days after the wedding revealed the fracture lines in our family and social circle. Some longtime friends pulled away, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. Their silence stung as much as open accusations. Others stood by me, quietly offering support. Helen's brother Mark was among them, his unwavering loyalty a balm in a storm. "You did what any father would do," Mark told me. "Don't let them push you out." But Emily's in-laws, particularly her mother, seemed to fan the flames. They whispered doubts, encouraged Emily's demands, and pushed their own agenda, one that seemed more about control and inheritance than family. Jason's silence was deafening. I sensed he was torn but unwilling to openly oppose his sister or his wife. The house, once a place of warmth, became a fortress of cold stares and whispered meetings. Helen and I found ourselves isolated, caught between family feuds and broken friendships. I realized that if I wanted to protect what Helen and I had built, I couldn't stay passive anymore. With Mr. Dawson's guidance, I began setting firm boundaries. Changing the locks on the house was painful but necessary. It felt like a physical barrier, a line drawn in the sand. I limited access, made it clear that any attempt to undermine me or my rights would not be tolerated. Helen worried about the growing divide, but I knew this was the only way to preserve our dignity and legacy. I started saying no to meetings where I was disrespected, stopped answering calls meant to pressure me into signing away my rights. It wasn't easy. Friends questioned if I was being too harsh, but standing firm gave me strength. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for respect, for recognition, for the family I had dreamed of. After the whirlwind of betrayal, arguments, and broken promises, I found myself alone in the house Helen and I had built with our own hands. The silence felt heavy, almost suffocating at times, but also strangely peaceful, the kind of peace that comes after the storm when there's nothing left to fight for, only to rebuild from the ashes. Helen and I spent many quiet evenings talking about what had been lost and what, if anything, could still be saved. Our conversations were often heavy with grief, but also tinged with a cautious hope. We accepted that some wounds run too deep for quick fixes, and some relationships might never return to what they were. I had to rebuild my peace from within. I stopped chasing the approval that was no longer there, the love that seemed conditional and fleeting. Instead, I focused on holding on to my integrity, on honoring the values I'd tried to teach my children: respect, honesty, and family. Friends who stood by us became lifelines. Small gestures, a phone call, a visit, a simple word of encouragement reminded me that I wasn't completely alone. I learned to appreciate these quiet acts of kindness more than ever before. At times, the loneliness was crushing, but I knew that healing starts with acceptance. Accepting what was, what couldn't be changed, and finding strength to move forward. Jason reaching out surprised me. For months, our relationship had been cold, distant, barely a conversation beyond the essentials. When his call came, I wasn't sure if I wanted to answer. Old hurts and anger held me back, but when I finally picked up, His voice was different, vulnerable, hesitant. He admitted mistakes, how the distance had grown, how outside influences had pulled him away, and how much he regretted not standing up for what was right. We talked for hours, slowly peeling back layers of paint and misunderstanding. It wasn't easy. We both carried scars, and neither of us expected a quick fix. But there was something precious in that conversation, a willingness to listen, to forgive, and to try again. We started small, family dinners, shared stories, honest conversations. Helen smiled quietly at the progress, hopeful but cautious. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and uncomfortable moments, but the cracks began to close, little by little. I realized that while some relationships might never be what they once were, others can find new roots when nurtured with patience and love. Respect matters more than money, and now they know it too. I learned painfully that wealth and property mean nothing if the bonds of family are broken. You can build a fortune, but if you lose respect, trust, and love, it all crumbles to dust. This story isn't just about inheritance or houses. It's about what happens when love turns to greed, when silence hides secrets, and when we forget the simple, powerful truth that family is built on respect. I hope my story reminds you to cherish your family, to listen, to communicate openly, and to never take respect for granted. Because, in the end, the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't land or money. It's the love and respect we share.